and welcome to the Space Telescope Public Lecture Series. Tonight we have a very special event for you, Finding Music of the Spheres, Hearing Stars by the Consonance Collective and the Bergamot Quartet of the Peabody Institute of the Johns Hopkins University. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Summers of the Space Telescope Science Institute, and I have to thank my amazing tech team who not only records this webcast, but gets it out to you live on YouTube, Thomas Marufu and Grant Justice. A reminder that the Space Telescope Public Lecture Series will continue to be online only until further notice. Our upcoming talks next month, June 1st, How to Hunt for Distant Worlds by Emily Rickman of the European Space Agency / Space Telescope Science Institute. In July, Quinn Hart will be back with another installment of her Armchair Astrophysics. If you remember, she gave us a wonderful talk last summer, and she has decided that she has so much to say, she'll send you some more. On August 3rd, we have a fantastic speaker that I have not yet found. I will fill that up in the next month. And if you want to find out who that next speaker is, well, then you can go to our website. If you just type in Hubble Public Lectures, you'll find this webpage, or you can type in www.stsci.edu/public-lectures. This tells you all about our lectures. It gives you, on the left, you can see the link to our webcast, both on YouTube and on the STScI webcasting site. And on the right, we have the place where you can subscribe to our lecture announcements when we reveal who that amazing August speaker will be. Also on the website are the links for each individual lecture. And if you click on the Read More link, you get the abstract of the talk, as well as links to the STScI webcast up top and the YouTube webcast down bottom. For email, as I said, the announcements, it's easiest just to sign up at the website, but you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and get notifications from our YouTube channel of new videos, as well as reminders of these live events. If you have comments or questions, you can send them to publiclecture@stsci.edu. Finally, if you want to follow us on social media, we have social media accounts for the Hubble Space Telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope, and for the Space Telescope Science Institute. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. I myself do a tiny little bit of social media. If you would like to hear what I have to say, you can follow me on Facebook or Twitter at Dr. Frank Summers. Our News from the Universe is not appearing this month. It will return in June. Why? Well, because we have a large number of speakers tonight, and I want to give all the time to them. We have five composers from the Consonance Collective, and we have the four folks, the artists in the Bergamot Quartet, and they will be speaking to you tonight. I also want to let you know that the videos, the full, complete compositions and the videos that go with them are available on YouTube in the Hearing Stars playlist. There are 5 videos, and the entire playlist lasts over 65 minutes. However, I want to point out that if you're watching this on YouTube, you're watching it on the Hubble Space Telescope YouTube channel. These videos were not posted on the Hubble Space Telescope YouTube channel. Instead, as you can see in the lower left, they were posted on the Space Telescope Science Institute YouTube channel. So you come to the Hubble Space Telescope YouTube channel for the lecture, and you go to the Space Telescope YouTube channel for the videos. All right, so it is my wonderful pleasure to introduce just one of the speakers tonight. Bobby Gee was raised in Shanghai, but he came to the US and did a double major in physics and music at UC Berkeley. Then he did a master's in composing at the Peabody Conservatory. He is currently working on new pieces for the Albany Symphony, music and working with a new music group called Mind on Fire. He will introduce, actually, he will start off the introductions of all the members of this amazing performing folks here tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, Bobby G.
All right, thank you so much, Frank, for that very generous introduction. Yeah, we're all super glad to be here, and we're all really excited just to, I don't know, be able to work with STScI, and that they were willing to give us a spot in their public lecture series. It's not super common having musicians come on here, so we're really glad that we got to be here. Yeah, so just to begin by introducing everybody else, so I will start out by introducing Consonance and who we are. So Consonance is a collective of composers. We all met as graduate students in composition at the Peabody Conservatory. And our whole thing is wanting to bring contemporary classical music to audiences through multimedia collaborations like this, and themed concerts, unconventional concert venues, and that kind of thing. So just to introduce everybody, obviously there's myself, there's Zach Gulaboff-Davis, there's Dan Despins, there's Gu Wei, and there's Sayuna Kim. Yeah, if you want to find out more about us, you can check out our website, which is up here, www.cnsnc.org. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Next, I will leave it to the Bergamot Quartet to introduce their members. I'll pass it off to cellist Irene Hahn. So let me go ahead and stop the share real quick.
Hi, I'm Irene. I am the cellist in Bergamot Quartet. And I think everyone would like to introduce themselves individually first before I talk a little bit more about who we are.
So yeah, hi, I'm Amy Ten, and I play the viola in the Bergamot Quartet.
Hello everyone, I'm Sarah Thomas, and I'm one of the violinists in the Bergamot Quartet.
Hi, I'm Lita Fink, and I'm also a violinist.
So we are a string quartet based in New York City. We are the graduate quartet at the Mannes School of Music right now. We met at Peabody in 2016, and we've been performing together ever since. We specialize in performing music by living composers, and that's how, through Peabody, that's how we got to get to know the composers of this album, and we were really excited to do that. I'm going to hand it over to Bobby to continue our presentation for this project.
Great, thanks a bunch, Irene, and thanks to the quartet for being here. Yeah, so just to explain a little bit more about Hearing Stars and how this whole project came together. So this was last year, this was in the before times, before COVID and everything. So the members of Consonance and Bergamot were getting together and just sort of talking, because we knew that we wanted to try and do some kind of a project or some kind of a concert together. Our original idea was that we were thinking about working with something in the visual medium, so, you know, film scores, that kind of thing. And the more we talked, the more the project ended up shifting until we decided to focus on space imagery, because for one thing, it is public domain, because, or it's at least available for fair use, because yay Hubble Space Telescope, yay science. And from there, as we began to explore more, we learned that the Space Telescope Science Institute, or STScI, the folks who manage all those photos and everything, were based in our backyard here in Baltimore. And so from there, we ended up just chatting more, and eventually the entire project has sort of evolved into this hour-long visual album depicting the life stages of stars. So that's what we're going to end up talking about today. Every single composer composed a different piece, or based on a different stellar life stage. So we'll start out with the birth of stars, we'll go on to star systems, we'll go on to supernovae and like the death of stars, and then black holes, and finally dark matter, just to close us out. And then after we're done with after each composer is done presenting their piece, we'll turn it over back to the quartet for them, just to explain a little bit more about what it was like to put together our pieces, because all the pieces have a variety of techniques that exist outside sort of standard classical, procedure and style. And part of the great fun with working with them was watching them sort of wrestle through our notation and our new ideas, and try and bring them to life as effectively as possible. Yeah, so if you like the videos or if you like what you see here, once again, check out the full playlist on YouTube. And if you like the music a whole lot, this whole album is available just, anywhere you listen to music, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, if anyone uses that. Yeah, cool. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in by explaining my particular topic. So here we go. So my piece is called Celeste Forma and is based on protostars, or this idea of forming star formation and how they go from, being gobbets of dust and gas and eventually becoming the raging, thermonuclear explosions and all that light up our night sky. So the overall structure of this piece broadly speaking, is in 3 chapters. So I'll talk more about each one. I'm just going to go ahead and give a quick overview here. So the first one, we start out with nebulae, and then it goes on to the rapid expansion of protostars. Basically, once protostars and these dense cores actually form, how they begin to grow, and they, very rapidly. And then finally, the last chapter of the piece is sort of based around main sequence stars. So once protostars have stabilized, and they're no longer, proto, so to speak, they're no longer exploding all over the place and trying to figure themselves out, so to speak, which is like a person in their 20s. They go on to become main sequence stars, which is what the end of the piece is all about. So the first movement, or the first chunk of the piece, is based on nebulae. So the way that I thought of nebulae was that they're sort of these big chaotic swirls of dust and gas, right? Like it's kind of impossible to predict with exact, pinpoint precision, oh, this exact part of the nebula, the nebula is going to is going to grow protostars first, and then this exact bit's going to happen first, and this protostar will happen here first, and that protostar will happen there next. That kind of pinpoint precision is not really possible for these kinds of massive, soupy, chaotic systems, right? And so instead, what we do know, though, is the overall behavior of these kinds of big chaotic systems. So basically, we know the rules that govern these nebulae, but we don't actually know, we can't necessarily, it's not actually even useful to explain with exact pinpoint precision, how exactly the system is going to evolve. And so the way that I wanted to translate that was with this little musical thing called box notation. And so what box notation is where the musician, basically I write these little boxes of music. So there's a couple of notes inside and some techniques for the musicians, and they are not trying to coordinate with each other with exact precision, right? Basically, they're all playing they're repeating the notes in these boxes in their own time, sort of in their own rhythm. And so basically what you get is this kind of unpredictable texture where broadly speaking, what it's going to sound like because the notes, the techniques are all written in the boxes, but you don't know what, the piece is going to sound different every time they play it, right? Because they're not trying to coordinate with each other with pinpoint precision. So that was sort of my way of trying to, imitate or simulate this notion of chaos and chaotic systems as a whole. So I'm going to go ahead and play a quick excerpt of my piece. So what you're going to hear is the 2 violins are playing these kinds of boxes, and the viola is going to play this beautiful melody that's sort of the main theme of this piece over it. So let's take a listen. Right. And then the second part of the piece is rapid expansion. So basically, once some of the gobbets of dust and all that begin to pull towards one another because of gravity, some of them clump together faster than others, and there's sort of a snowball effect, right? Where the ones that clump together first tend to clump together faster and faster because they attain greater and greater mass and pull in more material and all of that. And so you get these like really rapidly spinning cores that get hotter and hotter and pull in more and more matter. And, it's sort of off to the races at that point. They just kind of explode with lots of energy and lots of life. And so the way that I wanted to try and imitate this particular idea of, protostars that kind of slowly accumulate matter and grow, but are also very violent and, explosive and all of that, was to have this sort of pulsing, driving, cyclical kind of rhythm. You'll hear this repeating 3-note pattern that sort of oscillates, that sort of goes through the piece, that gives it a kind of pulse and rhythm. And the whole time it's sort of gathering energy. It's also like slowly going upwards in key. So, you'll start out on a certain key, and then as it goes, it just keeps modulating, or it keeps changing keys higher and higher and higher, sort of, ratcheting up the tension and everything. And then while all that's going on, you'll also have the other strings sort of giving these really intense crescendos and that kind of thing. I'll just go ahead and play that because the description only does so much. Great. And then the final chapter of the piece is once these, raging balls of fire, the protostars eventually stabilize, they become these things called main sequence stars, which is when they reach equilibrium between their own gravity and sort of the outward thermal pressure of, because they're essentially just like raging balls of like hydronuclear explosions and fusion and all that stuff, right? So that pressure obviously pushes outwards and gravity pulls inwards, and so at some point they stabilize and reach an equilibrium, and that's what main sequence stars are. So the way that I wanted to represent this musically was to sort of stabilize into a key that I thought was just, it's sort of the purest, people call it like the most primal key of C major, which is, just like all the white notes on a piano, right? And so it's this very simple, very transparent kind of sound that I wanted to sort of, arrive at after all the violence and all that of the piece beforehand. So just to show what that's like. Yeah, so that is an overview of my piece. Before I hand it off, I wanted to briefly just thank Dr. Massimo Roberto of STScI, an astronomer who I got to meet with over the course of writing this piece, and who was really helpful in just shaping the direction and everything of how I thought about stars and how I thought about the music. Yeah, so up next, I want to hand it off to my esteemed colleague and fellow composer, Zach Gulaboff-Davis, who will be talking about star systems. Yeah.
Zach, can you unmute?
There we go. Sorry about that. Should be working now. All right, yeah, I'm Zach Gulaboff-Davis, one of the 5 composers of the Consonance Collective. Real happy to be here. I'll be speaking briefly about my string quartet, Iridescence. So just to begin a little bit about the overall inspiration and whatnot. In contrast to some of my colleagues' works, my quartet takes a somewhat more abstract look at the cosmos, a bit of a kind of nebulous look at star systems, a bit abstract, just through the absolutely amazing imagery that STScI and affiliates have. It was just such a delight to sift through all this stuff. I absolutely enjoyed it. A little bit about the title. Iridescence, the phenomenon of certain surfaces that appear to change color as the angle of light or illumination changes, was especially pertinent to my work because I often play with the transparency of my selected media. So, for example, I'll overlay like videos of the quartet in tandem with imagery and simulate visualizations and stuff like that. So kind of creating this ever-evolving array of color. The work was composed pretty much in tandem with my search for visual materials. So my connection between the music and media was more or less direct and instantaneous during the compositional process. As a composer, that's super, super fun because oftentimes it doesn't quite unfold so organically, and being able to have these absolutely amazing videos and images to serve as a sort of kernel of inspiration. As I was working on this piece was just absolutely out of this world. I enjoyed it immensely. Iridescence, my quartet, is somewhat cyclical in nature, having a lot of sort of connective material overall, starting in one place, venturing off to sort of turbulent middle section, and then returning to materials that are somewhat reminiscent of the opening, kind of charting this path from dark to light in the upper registers of the instruments. I strove to capture the mystery and maybe austere beauty of star systems through sound and resulting video. So I'm just going to briefly guide you through the work and sort of my compositional process, how the piece unfolded, again, in tandem with these amazing media elements. So here we go. A little bit about the opening here. Listen for subtle harmonies, subtle gestures between the 4 instruments, just sort of passing around. Very sort of muted in nature. This forms actually the basis of the entire work. Here we go. So as I mentioned, this work is sort of constructed in 3 distinct sections. So at some point, I had to try to get to the next section, get to this more turbulent and energetic section. And in order to do that, the work sort of wanders and begins to build towards a climactic point. So here, listen as the music just sort of drifts and eventually ends up in this fairly exciting cacophony of sound, which we'll hear in the subsequent video. But this is sort of working towards that climax. So yeah, so these serene harmonies gradually build up and build up. And as you can see, I had so much fun mixing the transparency with the video of the quartet versus these absolutely amazing videos and images. And yes, so this moves along and eventually we reach our first sort of true point of climax, the beginning of the middle section. Here we go, let me play a bit of this. Over here, everything is faster paced. So it's extremely turbulent. Honestly, there's fiendishly difficult writing for all four members of the Bergamot Quartet. So they were taxed to their extreme to play this. And I also worked on interspersing much faster paced media here. So lots of rapid changes between clips, just faster moving stuff in general. I had a lot of fun with it. So the intensity here never really dies off. It just keeps building and building for a while until we finally reach the sort of ultimate climax of the piece, located more or less in the last third of the work. This ensuing wall of sound continues for a while and then gradually begins to dissipate as we transition into the final section. But here's just a bit of this cacophony of sound as we reach the final climax. And last but not least, as this section dies away, we finally return to the third section. Well, we get to the third section, a bit of a return of sorts. Again, sort of charting a cyclical course towards the end. This time, in the absolute upper extremities of the instruments, we still see these little gestures passing around between the instruments. This was probably my favorite part because I used some absolutely brilliantly colored images and videos here. just a tiny little tidbit of this. And as you might guess from this excerpt, the work kind of dies away in almost absolute silence not long after this. If you'd like to check out the full thing, again, you can find it on the STScI YouTube channel. A huge thank you to everyone involved with this, especially STScI, for all their support. And I'd now like to hand off the presentation to my esteemed colleague, Suyuna Kim, who will be talking about SN 1054, supernova. Thanks again.
Thank you, Zach. I'll share my screen. Hello, my name is Suyuna Kim, and I composed a piece about supernova 1054. When we started our project Hearing Stars, I chose this topic, Death of a Star, just because it sounded romantic and I didn't have a concrete idea what to write about. And so I started my pre-compositional research. With under the guidance of Dr. Korunpa Pirompakdi, I learned there are two types of death of stars. I learned how some stars die quietly as white dwarfs, and how some stars explode with all their power for the last time and leave this beautiful remnants. After I gained some knowledge, I was surfing the internet and suddenly saw this science article. It was supernova remnant from 6,000 light years away, our charming Crab Nebula. This was an article about the Crab Nebula. And then it said the Crab Nebula was discovered in 1731 by an amateur astronomer, John Bevis. And then this article was writing on something about that I didn't know before. It said, astronomers found out when the Crab Nebula was formed with the help of ancient records. In 1928, Hubble announced that they found out the record of a supernova 1054 in ancient Chinese documents, and the Crab Nebula is a remnant of the supernova. The ancient Chinese documents say, Jihe era, first year, 7th lunar month, 22nd day. Summer. In southeast sky, a strange star has appeared. Its color was reddish white. It was bright as a Venus that could be seen in daylight for 23 days. The star was visible at night for 2 years and then gradually disappeared in spring. The records of supernova 1054 can be found not only in China, but also in Korea, Japan, Turkey, and in a mural by Native Americans in Arizona region. Astronomers confirmed the exact date of the explosion thanks to the position of the crescent moon on the mural. The supernova exploded on July 5th, 1054. And this last paragraph just intrigued me. I began to imagine people in one summer day in 1054. Suddenly, people see a new strange star that is so bright that can be seen even in daytime. People get so curious about it. Some of them worry, some of them are fascinated, ask each other what it is, and then, even though they don't have an answer, they just write it down or draw it down, record it. They observe and record because they want to know what it is. People pass down their curiosities and bits of knowledge to next generations. And then, almost 1,000 years after, descendants study it and with knowledge that has accumulated through numerous generations, finally answer the question. They tell their ancestors, it wasn't a new star, it was the death of a star. People communicate beyond time. Here's my musical reenactment of people who witnessed the explosion of the supernova. In my imaginations, they are filled with curiosities, fascination, and awe. People have studied the supernova 1054 for 1,000 years. While people were doing this, its remnant, the Crab Nebula, very slowly expanded for 1,000 years. Another article that inspired me in writing this piece was this: The Last Breath of a Dying Star, captured by a Hubble Space Telescope. The article said, it takes a few thousand years for a star to breathe for the last time. It feels like an eternity for us humans, but it is just a split second for a star, whose entire life is several billion years. The Crab Nebula is the star's last breath that lasts for a few thousand years. Also, remember the Crab Nebula is 6,000 light years away from us, so maybe all of these events we are seeing now already has ended in the universe a few thousand light years ago. Let me play you my imagination of a star's last breath. The supernova 1054 and the Crab Nebula tell us how we study, explore, and accumulate knowledge through generations. It is the story of people who diligently observe and record unknown phenomena when there is no guarantee they'll have an explanations in their lives. It is the story of people who step onto the stepping stones laid by their ancestors and finally find the answer to the long-awaited question. Even at this very moment, I imagine people are communicating with the past and future, laying out or stepping on the stone. A desire for knowledge is the driving force of human history. My music is tribute to all our curiosities. Thank you. Our next speaker is Guwei. Guwei is going to talk about his piece, Beyond the Horizon. It's about the black hole. Welcome, Guwei.
Thank you, Sayuna. Okay, my name is Guwei, and I'm so happy to be here. And thank you to STScI for having us. And I'm so happy to be here to present my music together with my friends from Consonance and Bergamot Quartet. So my piece is called Beyond the Horizon. And when the project first started, I wanted to do something that's really mysterious about the universe. And since I've always been fascinated by the idea of like space travel and like going to different dimensions in space, I wanted to do something about black holes, because black holes is something that's really mysterious to us. We don't know a whole lot about it. So I want to explore into the idea of traveling into a black hole and not knowing what's going to happen when we go in, and yeah, the idea of mystery. So that's about my piece. And my piece, the overall structure is divided into three main sections. So there's a brief introduction which sets a scene in a vast universe. And the second section, it's about a journey of the protagonist into the black hole. And the third is my imagination of the emergence of the protagonist from the white hole. So in this case, the black hole is not where there is certain death, but there is a hope, right? There's a hope that we'll go somewhere when we enter the black hole. So in this case, it's actually a wormhole. And as I wrote in the program notes of my piece, this piece is a musical interpretation of my imagination of the unknown beyond the event horizon. That's the title, Beyond the Horizon, which could lead to a point of singularity where everything ceases to exist, or to another universe, in which case the black hole is in fact a wormhole. So I'm going to play you two excerpts from my piece. And the first excerpt is taken from the journey into the black hole. And in this excerpt, I explored two kind of physical effects, and I tried to portray these two kind of effects musically. So the first one is time dilation, the idea of time gradually slowing down for the observer as the traveler goes into the black hole. To reflect that kind of time slowing down, the music actually slows down gradually over the course of a few minutes. It's like, I think over 3 minutes, so over the course of 3 minutes, it just gradually slows down bit by bit. And I also use some extended techniques. So there are like techniques that you wouldn't normally hear in like strings. such as scratch tones, which is kind of when you apply a lot of pressure onto the string, so you create a very scratchy and noisy tone. And glissandi, which is like pitch bends. Um, so these kind of effects uh, depict the idea of distortion as created by the immense gravitational forces of a black hole. And then secondly is the Doppler effect. So the visual version of the Doppler effect as we enter a black hole is that light from outside the black hole will become blue shifted because of the immense gravitational force from the black hole. So in order to reflect that kind of Doppler effect, I use the audio version of the Doppler effect. So I guess one of the most famous examples of the Doppler effect in daily life is like when you're walking on the streets and an ambulance passes by and it goes, so kind of like the pitch gradually descends, right, as it passes by you. So there is a little bit of that in the piece as I give the strings, the violins in particular, some fragments where the pitch gradually descends. So that's a Doppler effect. Okay, and let me play you to this first excerpt. 1 minute. There we go. All right. So, and then now I'm going to play you guys a second excerpt. And in this excerpt is from the final section of the piece where the traveler emerges from the white hole. So again, this is totally imaginary. It is totally hypothetical, but I like to bring some kind of artistic liberty into the piece. So this is based on the hypothetical white hole and wormhole, and from which the protagonist emerges into another part of space-time. So again, the idea of like interdimensional travel to another part of space-time that really intrigued me as I was writing this piece. And the tone in this piece shifts to something that's more hopeful and more uplifting. And to reflect that, there is a technique which I use and that's called like a microtonal modulation. So the pitch of this melody which repeats over and over again, gradually rises in pitch, a bit by bit. And as you can hear in the following excerpt, there's the same melody. It gradually gets higher and higher and higher. And the gradual rise is very subtle. And that kind of leads to the final climax of the piece, which ends off the piece in a like a huge climax. Okay, so I'm gonna play the second excerpt. All right, that concludes my presentation. And last but not least, we have my esteemed colleague Daniel Deskins, who will be presenting on his piece called Dark Mysteries about dark matter.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Gu-wei. And thank you to STScI for having us here. It's a really great honor and wonderful opportunity to be able to share our music with all of you. As Gu-wei said, my piece is called Dark Mysteries, and it's about the concept of dark matter. So my original inspiration for this piece came from this picture, which NASA created in collaboration with STScI. It's a picture of the galaxy cluster Able 2744, and these beautiful colors that you see in the picture are a result of several images that were put together, and one of them is the mass distribution of the dark matter in the galaxy cluster, which you can see in the blue colors. So one of the reasons I wanted to explore dark matter in music is actually because it's such a big mystery to us still. Hence the title of my piece, Dark Mysteries. So in the 90s, my understanding is that what astronomers thought of originally was that the expansion of the universe was slowing down over time, but the Hubble Space Telescope actually took pictures of things at the edge of the universe that proved that the expansion of the universe is not slowing down, it's actually speeding up. And no one could explain why. So this theory was created that there was some kind of force or presence of matter that was actually taking up a vast majority of the universe. But the funny thing about dark matter is that there's so much we don't know about it. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know what it's made of, and it can't be detected by a lot of our current technology. The fascinating thing that I found about dark matter was that even though we can't see it, its presence can still be observed indirectly by the way it interacts with other things. So that's why in this picture I have here, you can see that there are these blue halos surrounding these pictures of galaxy clusters, and that's because of the way that the light is bending is actually being affected by the gravitational pull of the dark matter. So you can see that the dark matter itself is not visible, but it's actually affecting the way the light is bending around it. And I thought that was just like a really fascinating and profound thing, as well as the fact that there is this force in the universe that controls so much of what we know about the universe, and yet we don't know anything, or we know very little about that force itself. So I'd like to share a couple clips of my piece with you. The first one, in the first clip, you're going to hear what I was messing around with, or experimenting with rather, which are these things called subtones. So when you take two or more very, very high pitches and you place them very close together and you play them very close together, what happens is that this sort of phantom lower tone appears, and it sort of has this effect of ringing in your ear, but this tone is not actually being played by the quartet. It's sort of an musical effect. So I thought that was a really cool way of demonstrating how musically how dark matter is not entirely like we can't perceive it, but it is still there affecting us. So what you're about to hear are these musical subtones being played by the quartet, while this sort of very fast and violent and very difficult cello solo is being played underneath it. So let's take a listen. All right, and then the next clip I want to share with you comes immediately after, and in this section of music, I wanted to demonstrate just how I wanted to demonstrate musically how the universe is expanding at a faster and faster rate. So naturally, I wanted the music to increase gradually in speed until it reaches a sort of fever pitch. And so let's take a listen to that. I should add that the some of the videos and pictures used throughout were simulations of what the distribution of dark matter throughout the universe might look like if it was visualized, and I thought those were very beautiful and added a layer of profundity to this entire production. So thank you for watching and for listening. So next up, I'd like to introduce the four people, or reintroduce rather, the four people who made this entire project happen. Without them, this wouldn't have happened, of course. So here are four of my esteemed colleagues, the wonderfully talented Bergamot Quartet.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Dan, for turning it over to us. We're super happy to be part of this. This is really fun for us. And it's so great to hear all the members of Consonance Collective really talk through both the inspiration and the methodology behind their pieces. It's really fascinating. We've learned a lot through this project, and it's been really fun. We all think space is cool, but none of us knew that much beforehand. And I can certainly speak for myself and say that I know a lot more now, and my curiosity is piqued to learn more. So we're just going to talk a little bit about what the string quartet side of this process was like for us and what our experience was. This was a pretty unique project for us, actually. As a quartet, we, as Irene said in the introduction, primarily focus on music by living composers, which means that we get to have kind of a more collaborative process in the music that we program than the average string quartet. There's a ton of repertoire for string quartet out there. Most of it was written by people who died a long time ago. So when we perform music, often we get to collaborate directly with the composers, and that's amazing because we could ask them any question that we want. And the composers can even make changes based on what they hear. But more than that, with this project with Consonance, we really got to craft this whole program with them. We sat down together over a year ago and kind of just talked about what we were interested in and what this could look like. And knowing that there was a goal to have a multimedia component was especially exciting for us, because that's been a goal of ours for a long time and something that we're starting to do more as well with our projects, just as a quartet. So we really got to have this very personal and collaborative process from start to finish with Consonance, which was awesome. We already knew all of them from school at Peabody. So we were able to be in touch pretty continually throughout the process. Whenever any of the composers had questions or wanted to hear a snippet of their piece, we could kind of have dialogue back and forth about that. And that makes bringing music to life especially exciting for us, because we know that it's really written with us and our instruments in mind. So it has the potential to be really a very profound collaboration for everyone involved. And I hope that that comes through in the music to everyone listening. The music is incredibly dense, but really just gorgeous, and I think extremely successful. I also wanted to mention a little bit about why we think this kind of collaboration should happen and keep happening between performers, composers, and people from totally different disciplines, in this case, astronomy. I really think that something as vast as the study of space kind of needs to be explored from the perspective of many different mediums. Because we can't really, someone like me who's has a degree in music can't really visualize what's out there in the cosmos by reading scientific texts and kind of going about it the science and math way. But being able to play music that was written about it helps bring it to life for me. And I think I speak for all four of us when I say that, and hopefully some of you listeners might feel the same way. It's a way in for us to the emotional aspect of learning about these vast topics. And I think Soyuna spoke really beautifully about that in particular when she was talking about her piece. There's this incredible emotion that comes with this kind of discovery, and I think that's what has kept humanity going for millennia. So we think that collaborating between the arts and sciences is a really, really rich endeavor. And if this project had occurred not in COVID times, we were planning to kind of tour it to schools and various educational circumstances so we could share it with younger listeners and pique some curiosities about how science and math can coexist with music. Because of course, all of those fields have a very long history of coexisting. In ancient Greece, they were thought to be really on the same plane and kind of using the same parts of the brain. So that's super fascinating. And we really think that there should be many more projects like this in the world. There of course are, but we really wanted to see this continue, this kind of multimedia and crossing careers, I guess, collaboration. So earlier on, when Bobby was talking about this project, he mentioned that these pieces use non-traditional sounds outside of non-traditional repertoire for the string quartet. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about what that means. So again, you've probably noticed that this music doesn't sound a whole lot like Mozart or Beethoven, who, when we ask people what they think of when we say classical music, those two composers are usually who they list first. Repertoire for the string quartet has evolved a lot in the last few hundred years, as exhibited by these 5 pieces. Though of course they draw on the lineage that's been there since the time of Haydn. And so each of these 5 composers have used different techniques to evoke the elements of space that they chose to focus on. And we're just going to dive into talking a little bit more specifically about what those were and how it felt to play them. So Bobby mentioned during his presentation that his piece uses box notation, which is different from traditional notation in that traditional notation is written on a 5-line staff, kind of like you'd write on a line in notebook paper, per se. When we have, and that tells time, that tells location on the fingerboard, i.e. what pitch we're playing, and basically every parameter that we need to know when we're reading music. When using box notation, it's a lot less specific. So that can look like a lot of things. It might give us kind of a general pitch area where we get to choose specific pitches out of it. It might give specific pitches, but we get to pick the order. So it allows us this, kind of element of improvisation, which is really fun to play. It forces us to really communicate to an even greater degree than we already do as 4-string quartet players. And it allows us to really find kind of a core of sound that feels the most right to us. So I think the presence of this box notation in sections of Bobby's piece really helped us find a specific character. And Bobby's piece is super exciting. I really hope you're able to check out the full versions of all 5 of these pieces because they're amazing. But that's something that probably started outside of classical music. You might see it some in jazz and in experimental music in particular. But really, really glad that Bobby chose to write in that way for this piece. One thing we thought was notable about Zach's piece, Iridescence, was he uses this huge range of the instruments. And I'm talking about like the lowest note, the C on the cello, to the very highest harmonics on the violin, which the violin can literally play notes that are so high you can't hear them. Sarah and I are definitely a little bit deaf in our left ears after many years of playing. But Zach making use of that huge range of the string quartet, I think really evokes this sense of vastness. And he talked about the piece being very hard, and it is very hard. Zach also used some kind of non-specific notation in moments that allowed us to kind of just play around, creating really what I like to think of as a space rather than a linear narrative. Traditional notation, I think, lends itself much more to linear narrative, whereas more experimental notation allows us to kind of create this setting that we're playing around within in a less kind of from point A to point B way. And I think that was audible in the very opening of Zach's piece, which he played for us earlier. So Yuna's piece is, I think, a lot different than the others in some ways. She definitely wrote the slowest piece of the 5. And this piece is so gorgeous. We really fell in love with it from the moment we played the first melodies. And also really liked that she chose to work with kind of the more emotional side of exploration rather than specific scientific phenomena, which is really cool. And going back to what I was saying earlier, we think it's really important to use music to explore this side of space exploration because we can really relate to it. Something we love about Soyuna's piece is that these slow melodies in the beginning and end really call to mind like ancient times and kind of this whole stretch of time from the first space explorers to now. And we can kind of empathize with that wonder that every person making discoveries about the world beyond our own have felt. For Gouet's piece, this piece was really wild to play. He talked about the Doppler effect being present in the piece, and I'm sure you heard that the tonality was a little bit weird in this piece. Over the course of the last third or so of the piece, he actually asks us to very gradually kind of shift up the fingerboard. It's like a modulation. If this is something that's familiar to anyone that's studied music at all, where we move from one key to another. In the case of Gouet's piece, we move just a very short distance. So it's not even like a full note's worth of distance. And doing this over the course of several minutes is really hard to do at the same time, but super unsettling. And it really feels like we do kind of move from a familiar world into an alien one. Maybe like you look in the mirror and something on the other side of the mirror moves and you didn't move, like that kind of subtle unsettlingness. And it's really fun to play. And something like this is really only possible for an ensemble like a string quartet because we don't have frets on our fingerboard. We can really slide to any point we want to on our fingerboard. We can play all the notes between the notes, as you might say. So really playing with these subtle shifts of pitch and time was a huge element of Gouet's piece, calling to mind what happens to time and space when you go through a black hole. And in Dan's piece, as he was talking about, there's this kind of magical tone that occurs when you play 3 very high notes very close together. This is related to what I was saying with Gouet's piece, how there's kind of notes between the notes that we are able to play on our stringed instruments. And in rehearsal, we call it our special friend or our friend because it's this pitch that just appears and it's coming from nowhere. And you can only hear it if you listen very closely. It's pretty creepy, but very effective. And this is a really fun effect to play. Again, not super kind to me and Sarah's ears, but super worth it. And this is something we always wish composers would use more, because it's so rich, this range of pitches that are available to us that typically are not used by people composing Western classical music. So so that's a lot of fun. And so yeah, that's just kind of broad strokes overview of what our experience learning the pieces was like. We got to record them all in studio in Baltimore together last fall, which was super fun. That was, I think, the first time since our initial meeting that most of us, not all of us, but most of us were in the same room together, which was great. And yeah, do any of the other Bergamots have anything to add to that?
I think that was a really good summary. Yeah, I really enjoyed playing all of these pieces and getting to know the composers through their music. And I really hope that other people will perform these pieces, because it really is, all of them have really amazing techniques and textures that I think everyone should practice.
Yeah, absolutely. The music is written down and should absolutely be played by other string quartets. So please throw any questions in the chat on YouTube. We'd love to talk more about how this all came together. And I think I'm going to toss it back to Bobby to take us away.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bergamot. And well, yeah, thanks so much, Lita, really, for giving all those incredibly insightful thoughts and I don't know, insights into how realizing our pieces was. All that is actually really interesting for us as composers to know as well. And we hope that just as just as lay people or as science people, that some of that was interesting and engaging to you. I have to give credit where credit is due, and also thank the various organizations that helped support this project, including the Maryland States Arts Council, the Jersey City Arts Council, and the Awesome Foundation for providing funding that allowed us to get this whole project going and to figure out all the production on costs and all that kind of thing. I also want to thank Caroline Xia, who is a real monster filmmaker. We gave her 5 music videos to shoot in like a day, and she managed to pull it off, so we were incredibly grateful for that. So if you can, we would love if you could stick around for a Q&A, and if not, may the 4th be with you all. Have a great Star Wars day. Thank you all so much.
All right, thank you very much, Bobby, and thank you to all our composers and our performers. This is truly a unique and special presentation for the Public Lecture Series. I will totally agree with Lita on all of this idea of trying to get art and science working together. As an astronomer who does visualizations, we take the astronomy, we put it into I get to be an astronomer who makes movies. So I get to do a part of this. And I will always say that adding the music, when we get to the visualization done, adding the music is such an important element to really bring up the emotion. Why doesn't everybody turn on their video cameras so that we can see you all? And we'll have a big Brady Bunch type presentation. All right. And we have some questions. Now, as host, I get to ask some of the first questions. So, Bobby, you were doing star formation, right?
Yes.
Protostars and star formation and such. And I got to imagine that the star, when it goes main sequence, is when the fusion turns on, with hydrogen fusion, it turns into the core. Is there some sort of crescendo that a musical element that says fusion to you?
Yeah, totally. That's actually a really good question. So the part leading up right to the last excerpt that I showed, this pretty C major bit, is probably some of the thorniest and most violent that at least my piece gets. I don't want to say the whole album, but basically what's happening there is almost all the musicians are just like shredding on their instruments. There isn't really a kind of clear kind of pitch. It's just super violent and really explosive. It's super awesome, and it was a lot of fun watching the quartet sort of lean into that, because I haven't met musicians who would be that willing to sort of, I don't know, freak out, I guess, in front of a microphone, so to speak. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
All right. I had a question for Zach. you talked about the video compositions that were part of your sequence. And so what I wanted to know was how much did the composers play a role in the video editing, right? Because I know that you probably worked on the collecting images. Do you do part of the editing, or did you have somebody else do it and you stood over them and said, no, I want this, I want this, I want this? How did that work?
Awesome question. It was entirely a collaborative process throughout the whole thing. However, the composers, once they got the raw footage, so once they had all those amazing images, visualizations, etc., from STScI and everyone, and they had the raw video from that epic video shoot that Bobby was just talking about a few moments ago. We, shot like 8 hours of material from the string quartet. Once we had all that raw material, it was basically on us to just put it together. So, we were all sort of at different stages in our video editing careers. We want to do a lot more of this, but I'll say it was definitely a wonderful learning experience for me and all my colleagues, for sure. Definitely one of the most fun parts of it. And I know we all started the formative research process and, sort of amassing all our STScI related videos very, very early in the process, like I was mentioning in my piece. But then just putting them all together at the end was definitely on us, and it was exciting and daunting at the same time.
That does sound quite a challenge. Let's see, what other questions did I write down? Oh, Suyuna, you put out there about this idea of communication across the generations, across the centuries, from 1054 up through to today, and it just occurred to me like music really does the same thing, doesn't it? In terms of building off of the composers and the ideas that have been around for centuries. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that? Did it affect any of your piece in that idea?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think I mentioned that it's the communication and passing down through the generation is the motivation of our whole human history. And I think it includes science and all the music and all the humanities, everything in our lives. So I totally agree with that. And yeah, that's what inspired my piece. Yes.
All right. I don't want to take prerogative and ask all my questions because I have about 5 or 6 more. So I'm going to bring on Grant Justice. Grant, why don't you turn on your video? And he's been monitoring our our quite boisterous chat tonight.
Yes.
And I know you've pulled a few questions out of there. So why don't you go ahead and ask one?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just go kind of in order. So the first one would be for Zach. Especially for your piece, do composers sometimes have specific arrangements for different celestial bodies, different types of like interstellar phenomena? Or is there an instrument or instruments that you associate specifically with particular phenomena or celestial bodies?
Great question. I definitely say for the former part of it, it's very, very specific to composer. Actually, the caveat is all this is super specific to composer. So I'd love to hear what my esteemed colleagues think of all this stuff as well. But personally for me, honestly, I was in the perfect medium. Anything strings based, in conjunction with astronomy is kind of amazing because strings can sustain, they can sustain forever. They're not like woodwind instruments that have to, take breaths. They're not like piano where the sound decays. They can sustain forever, kind of create this wash of ethereal sound. And at the same time, just like Bergamot was talking about, they can create sort of sounds outside the norm, extended techniques, otherworldly things you might not expect to hear from, say, a conventional acoustic instrument. Like, for example, in my piece, I have this section that just sort of drifts through the bubble nebula. And I couldn't think of a better instrument to use than a string quartet. Maybe more strings, maybe, a string orchestra or something like that. But strings are
maybe
definitely...
theremin?
Yeah, that would be amazing.
So, Gu, would you comment on this, because you created so much tension in part of your piece there, and using the strings was just like, wow! I'm surprised you could. I felt like you sustained it for a really long time there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the point that with strings, there's so many possibilities that you can do with the extended sounds and effects that you wouldn't necessarily hear normally. So with like space and especially my piece with black holes, right? With the heavy distortions and that kind of effect. I thought that using strings was like really effective way to portray the visual effect in an audio way. Yeah.
Okay, great. Grant, I think we had one for Daniel about the imagery.
Yeah, we had someone in the chat who was asking about the imagery in the background of Daniel's performance, the visuals that you chose, specifically about whether or not M87 was in there, but also just to elaborate a little bit more. And just as a reminder to the whole group, if there are any of these questions or whatnot that you want to chime in on, please do. There's a bunch of us. This is the whole point.
Oh, that's a great question. So I guess to further elaborate, those were visualizations of simulations that were created based on data that was gathered of the distribution of dark matter within specific areas. So I think the one that was sort of very sort of like had a lot of purples and yellow-ish and very warm colors was actually from the Andromeda Galaxy. And there was another one that was from something called the Millennium Simulation, which was just a project that was like designed to sort of take all of this data and sort of visualize it in a more artistic way for us to see. And the one that was during the clips of Irene playing her cello solo was another similar one. That was yeah. that's about as much clarification as I could give off the top of my head.
It's
Well,
all
yeah.
good. The exact same question, rereading the chat, there was some questions about Gu Wei's visuals as well. If you want to continue, elaborate, and then pass it off.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned the use of like my choice of using M87 as a space imagery. Yeah. So part of the reason why I chose that is because like that's I believe the only image we have now of like an actual black hole. Like the first picture of a black hole we taken, that was part of the M87 galaxy. So because like most of my videos, like the videos I use in my piece, right, they are actually visualizations. They're not actual pictures of black holes because they're just so hard to see. So I chose that imagery, just to have something that's that's actually taken by like what is an actual photograph. So it's not like so it's not just all visualizations. Yeah.
Okay, great. Love to hear from some of the artists from the quartet because they talked about sort of pushing you guys to extreme, going to these really high notes into these really low notes, sort of making you improvise and such. And you had to learn these, right? Because you're working with live with not things that. It's not like an orchestra where you've played this symphony over and over for, and where you go around various symphonies. So tell us a little bit about how hard it is to work and learn this stuff, although I'm sure it's enjoyable.
Yeah, I think that's something that we really love about getting to play really brand new music, and kind of getting to explore a piece for the first time that no one else has played, because that means it is really up to us and up to the composer to figure out exactly what this does mean. And so in some ways, yes, it is sometimes challenging and a creative and welcomed challenge. But it also sometimes gives us a lot of freedom that's really nice, and being able to say, okay, we get to figure out how we can make this particular new weird technique sound as good as it can. And we get to make strange noises on our instruments until we find something that really works, you know. That's really what it looks like a lot of times, is trial and error. And in a way, that's what we're doing with any music that we would be playing. That's what we're doing with Mozart, that's what we're doing with Beethoven too. Always trial and error. How can we make this sound the best that we can make it sound? But there is an added element with this really, like I said, brand new music, to kind of take that to a different level, or maybe in a slightly different way. So I wouldn't say that it's more challenging than if we were playing older music, because everything has its unique challenges, but it does bring kind of a different way of approaching it sometimes. It's a great question. Thank you.
Anybody else from the quartet want to comment on?
Yeah, everything Sarah said is super true, and I just want to add that a lot of the techniques that these composers use, we don't learn in conservatory actually. These are fairly new techniques. So there is a little bit of a learning curve, and a lot of the times we just kind of have to, like Sarah said, experiment. But yeah, these are all very new techniques that a lot of conservatory students are not really experimenting with.
And I think also, just to piggyback on what Irene said about these extended techniques, it's really fun for us to also use, because like, yeah, they're being used more so in contemporary and newer works as opposed to older classical music. But I think being able to blend these like newer, less orthodox sounds is also like a really fun process for us, because we can get to be really creative with like how all these sounds can actually be made with just our instruments. They're the same instruments that were being used 200 years ago as right now, and it can just do so much more. And I hope that composers are still discovering hopefully new ways of using it. Let us know if you do. But yeah, it's a really exciting process for us.
Well, I have to say that, you know, there is a mindset of what a string quartet is, and you guys have really expanded that here tonight. Grant,
Thank you.
Yeah, I actually have some expansion on the last couple points. For the quartet specifically, there's obviously a lot of improvisation and ambiance that's being created by the instruments, like you just mentioned, in not necessarily, I would say, unusual, but ways that you would not particularly expect in a piece like this that's used to create sort of this atmosphere. So in that sort of improvisation, do you find it easier to just be given a key and go find it? Or do you like the boxes that were mentioned as far as like a loose guideline, and from there you can, you know, noodle your way into the atmosphere of where you want to be? And continuing on that, I'm sorry, this is a long one, I'm combining two. More specifically for the composers, once they have talked about the act of doing so, what was it you were trying to demonstrate with the discordancy and the off-tempo and the seeming, to at least the audience online, a little more random and avant-garde pieces or choices that have been made?
Okay, who from the quartet wants to handle the first part of that?
Sorry for the giant question of doom.
No, that's a great question. I think what we found, the four of us, is that when we have less specific music in front of us, the most useful thing for us to know, and the most exciting thing for us to know, is what the composer wants us to be evoking. And there's, of course, a number of ways that can be communicated. Often just like plain English works the best. Like, it's great to know if we see kind of like some visual information, to know that the composer wants us to be evoking something ethereal and gauzy, or something tense and nervous, or a particular nebula that's being born, or just kind of knowing what the goal is. We know our instruments really well, and we're still learning more about them every day, kind of as Amy and Irene are talking about, in collaboration with the composers we work with, who have ideas that we would never have, because they're like maybe a little bit removed from the instruments and kind of can open their minds more. But we we love to be able to kind of be pushed to really make the most of our instruments and create sounds that will evoke the emotion or scene in question. And I think typically that isn't necessarily achieved the best by just like giving us a key or that kind of framework. I think really what a lot of these composers have done with this particular music is to kind of go away from tonality a little bit. Like I think probably the piece by Gouet had the most audible key center, but some crazy stuff happened to that key, as you heard. So yeah, that's a great question. I'll let one of the composers maybe talk about the rest of it.
All right, yeah. So which composer would like to talk about how you're challenging?
Yeah, I can take that question first, just because I really like the question and because I really like the subject matter.
Same
yeah,
here.
so,
I'll tackle a bit of it too. Go for
great,
it.
thanks, Zach. Yeah. So yeah, I guess for me the question had to do with like what were we trying to do right as composers? Why were we playing around with sounds that could be perceived as like barely even music, right? Just like super vicious, very nasty sounds and all that combined with well, yeah. So I think for myself, when I think about stars, at least I tend to think of like this very grandiose, romantic kind of image of like, celestial, almost religious kind of quality to them. But at the same time, like from a scientific standpoint, like stars are like really horrifying and you wouldn't actually want to be near one or like even at any point like remotely close to one, right? Because it's just like super, super violent and like they would, I forget how hot they get. They get very hot. And so that whole idea of like really nasty and just dark and violent behavior of stars, for myself was like what I was trying.
Explosions are a thing.
Explosions, exactly. It was basically what I was trying to do, at least in my particular piece, sort of going between this really religious, really beautiful sort of portrait of stars and this very, I think like zoomed in kind of up close and personal portrait of stars and that are in this very sort of, I don't know, violent kind of, in this violent kind of fashion, right? I'll let Zach take over from here.
No, I absolutely second all of that. I'll just add just a touch in terms of sort of the aleatoric or indeterminate notation we were using. I know Bobby and I used a lot of boxes and stuff like that. And personally, I found, especially when working with such amazing musicians as we had the privilege to work with, that giving a dose of freedom to the performers actually creates a lot of confidence, because you don't have to be so insanely specific about everything, like, oh, this note has to happen exactly here. Because honestly, if you're going for a specific effect, like you're going for this kind of, nebulous, maybe perhaps slightly frightening sound here and there, everything doesn't have to be notated to a T. And it's almost better to hand it over to such absolutely brilliant musicians and let them take it from there. The other thing about all this box notation and whatnot is it could seem like this sort of esoteric thing that happens in the New Music Academy or whatever, but it's also applicable across a wide spectrum of things. I've looked at lots of film scores that employ these devices actually all over the place. So it's fun to think about that and sort of its broader implications overall.
That was one of the words that came up in the chat as we were talking back and forth, is atmosphere. This is intended to create an effect. It's intended to bring you a place, or at least that's the sense that I got from it. And I wanted you guys to be able to elaborate a little more on the intent and the emotion behind.
That's very much what I went with on my piece. I'll turn it over to someone else.
Anybody else want to make a comment on it? I mean, so you talked about the last breath of the Crab Nebula, of the star that became the Crab Nebula. I thought that was an incredibly poetic way to work it in.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really liked that part. So even though that is the last part of my piece, I wrote it at the beginning. That was the first part as I wrote for this piece because I really liked that concept. When I was writing that, I was imagining just a lone star that is in the universe and no one is around around it, and it's like 6,000 light years away from us. It's so far and it's so isolated. And I was just imagining how the star would feel by itself, like, and then I wrote it. So yeah, I guess that's very atmospheric, and we just need to feel what the star feels. Yes.
All right, I think we could go for one more question if we've got it, Grant. Do we have one more, or we can finish up here?
I combined my questions into that giant doom.
Okay, great. All right, any of the composers or the performers have anything, any last comments they want to say? It's been an amazing performance here tonight. Usually we have in our chat people saying hello from Australia, hello from Germany, hello from California, Tennessee, whatever. What I think is really cool tonight is that our performers, all of us, are coming from different places. Yes, I'm in Baltimore, Grant's in Baltimore, but some of you are in New York, right? Some of you are somebody in California, if I remember. And Gu, you are in
I think
Singapore.
Gu's in Singapore along with one other.
Yeah, so thank you for getting up way early to come and join us for this. We have really a multicultural and around the world collaboration here. Thank you all so very much for this. I have to say to my audience that June 1st, Emily Rickman, How to Hunt for Distant World. We will be back in a month. Won't have this many speakers, but we'll still have a great talk for you. Thank you all and have a great night.
Thank you.